The same university that brought us radar technology offered a course that made headlines across America. The course was called CMS 997, Topics in Comparative Media, and its subject was American professional wrestling. Among the wrestlers studied in this elite academic setting was a 7-foot-tall Frenchman who never graduated high school, a man who consumed 7,000 calories a day in alcohol alone, a man whose body was slowly killing him from the inside out. His name was Andre Roussimoff. The world knew him as Andre the Giant, but why would one of the most prestigious universities on the planet dedicate academic resources to studying a professional wrestler? The answer reveals something profound about how we understand culture and performance, and the stories we tell ourselves about what it means to be human. This is the story of why MIT studied Andre the Giant. To understand why Andre ended up in a Massachusetts Institute of Technology curriculum, we need to go back to the 1950s in France. In 1954, a philosopher named Roland Barthes published an essay that would later appear in his 1957 collection, Mythologies. This piece would change how intellectuals thought about professional wrestling forever. It was called The World of Wrestling. Barthes watched wrestling in small Parisian venues and saw something the mainstream dismissed. He recognized that wrestling was not attempting to be a sport. It was a spectacle. Spectacles serve a completely different function than sporting contests. In sport, the outcome matters above all else. Who wins? Who loses? The drama comes from uncertainty. But in wrestling, Barthes observed, the function of the wrestler is not to win. It is to go exactly through the motions which are expected of him. The job of a wrestler is not winning, it is performing. This was a radical insight in 1957. Wrestling was considered low culture, something for the uneducated masses. But Barthes saw it differently. He compared wrestlers to characters in Greek tragedy. He likened the wrestling ring to the stages of antiquity. The body of the wrestler, Barthes wrote, is the seed of his character. Like the commedia dell'arte, the wrestler's appearance is a perfect predictor of his actions. In other words, when you see a wrestler, you know immediately whether he is good or evil. The physique tells the story before a single punch is thrown. This essay would become foundational. It opened the door for academics to take wrestling seriously, not as athletic competition, but as cultural performance, as mythology made flesh. And no wrestler in history embodied mythology quite like Andre the Giant. Andre Roussimoff was born on May 19, 1946, in Coulommiers, France, and grew up in the small town of Molienne, about 40 miles east of Paris. He was a beautiful baby. He was normal. Those are the words of his brother Antoine, describing Andre before everything changed. At 15 years old, Andre began to grow and grow and grow. He had a condition called acromegaly, caused by a tumor on his pituitary gland that produced excessive amounts of growth hormone. Unlike gigantism, which occurs during childhood, acromegaly continues to affect the body throughout adulthood. The bones keep thickening, the organs keep enlarging, the body becomes a prison. By adulthood, Andre stood somewhere between 6'9" and 7'2", depending on who you asked. His wrestling promoters billed him at 7'4". He weighed over 500 pounds at his heaviest. He wore a size 22 shoe. In his hands, a regular beer can looked like something from a dollhouse. Andre left school at 14 to work on his family's farm. His size made him invaluable for labor, but it also made normal life impossible. "They do not build anything for a giant," Andre once said. He needed a pencil to dial a telephone because his fingers were too large for the buttons. He could not fit into airplane lavatories and had to relieve himself in a bucket during flights. Unless he traveled in a specially modified van, driving meant hours of agony as his massive frame contorted into spaces not designed for him. This was the reality behind the spectacle. This was the man behind the myth. Andre began wrestling in Europe in the late 1960s, working under names like Giant Ferret in France and Mr. Roussimoff in Japan. Europe and Japan were where he honed his act. His career took a crucial turn when he joined International Wrestling Enterprises in Japan, the #2 promotion in that country. The rival Japan Wrestling Association had access to mainstream American wrestlers, so the International Wrestling Enterprises president, Isao Yoshihara, went to Europe to scout foreign talent. Andre's tours for International Wrestling Enterprises as Mr. Roussimoff were a major career move that helped him get noticed in the West. When Andre came to North America, he only spoke French. His first stop was naturally Montreal, where French-speaking promoters could communicate with him. He wrestled under the name Jean Fer, named after a Paul Bunyan-esque mythological character from French-Canadian folklore. Montreal became his first North American base. Montreal was in the middle of a wrestling boom period. It was in Montreal that the persona Andre would use for most of his career was developed. The persona he adopted there would travel with him for years. But his transformation into a global phenomenon came when he met Vince McMahon Sr., the promoter of the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. This was the moment Andre became a truly global figure. McMahon Sr. understood something crucial about Andre. The traditional wrestling territory system, where wrestlers stayed in one region and built long-term storylines, would not work for someone this unique. Once fans saw Andre, the novelty would fade. You cannot be amazed by something you see every week. Novelty was the problem to solve. Montreal promoters had already realized this. It was hard to come up with scenarios for a giant in a typical full-time North American territorial promotion. The solution was to make Andre a traveling attraction. Traveling allowed the wonder to last. So McMahon created a revolutionary booking strategy. Andre would travel constantly, appearing in every territory across North America and the world, staying just long enough to sell out arenas before moving on. This was a revolutionary approach to promotion. There were as many as 32 different North American territories at the time Andre arrived from Europe. He would spend just under 2 months performing in each region before moving to the next. 32 territories offered constant options. There was nobody else in the business at that time, said wrestler Jerry Lawler in the 2018 HBO documentary, where you could say, "Let me put this guy on your card and you will have an automatic sellout." Nobody else could draw that kind of attention. There were a few ways Andre would end up in a given territory. Sometimes he was brought in as a special attraction to bolster a big card, like Stampede Week in Calgary, or the Superdome Spectacular in New Orleans. He might be brought in as the tag team partner of the top local babyface who needed a secret weapon against heels. If a promotion was running a battle royal, the biggest drawing gimmick match of the era, Andre was often brought in as the designated super heavyweight. Special attraction was his role. Promoters had to guarantee Andre a certain amount of money and also pay McMahon's booking fee. This arrangement made Andre one of the few wrestlers who could work across all territories while remaining nominally affiliated with WWE. Booking fee was part of the deal. In 1974, the Guinness Book of World Records listed Andre as the highest paid wrestler in the world, earning a reported $400,000 annually. Adjusted for inflation, that is roughly $2 million by modern standards. Highest paid summed up his market value. But McMahon did more than manage Andre's schedule. He shaped his mythology. McMahon discouraged Andre from performing athletic maneuvers like drop kicks, even though Andre was capable of such moves early in his career. He wanted Andre portrayed as a large, immovable monster, something beyond human. McMahon began billing him as Andre the Giant and marketed him as the eighth wonder of the world. This is where Roland Barthes' insights become crucial. The physique of the wrestler constitutes a basic sign, Barthes wrote. Like a seed, it contains the whole fight. Andre's body was the ultimate sign. Before he even entered the ring, his presence communicated something primal. He was a force of nature. He was larger than life. He was myth made real. Andre also made a name through local news appearances. He was shown throughout the country, appearing on television news programs, shaking hands with journalists who winced in pain, lifting 2,000-pound weights, letting interviewers try on his gigantic clothing. When the camera was on Andre, he knew how to sell himself to fans. This media strategy helped Andre become one of the first professional wrestlers to gain national and international fame. Word spread. The traveling attraction became a household name. In spring 2007, Andre the Giant appeared in the MIT curriculum, spanning pages 66 through 81 of the top 100 pro wrestlers of all time. But Andre was not the only wrestler studied. The course material covered a comprehensive history of professional wrestling through its performers. Students read about Bret Hart, analyzing the technical excellence that earned him the nickname, the excellence of execution. Shawn Michaels represented the emergence of a more athletic, high-flying style in the 1990s. Ric Flair, considered by many the greatest professional wrestler of all time, received extensive coverage. His mastery of psychology, his ability to make opponents look credible while ultimately prevailing, represented a different kind of excellence than Andre's spectacle. The curriculum included The Undertaker, examining how a supernatural character could be sustained for decades. Steve Austin represented the Attitude Era's shift toward anti-heroes who blurred the line between good and evil. The Rock was covered, analyzing his crossover appeal and eventual transition to Hollywood stardom. Mick Foley, whose lecture had packed the Green Building, appeared in the readings. Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit represented the technical wrestling renaissance of the early 2000s. The course's focus was on spectacle and craft. The viewing schedule was equally comprehensive. Students watched classic matches featuring Bruno Sammartino versus Larry Zbyszko, Bob Backlund versus Jimmy Snuka, and Pat Patterson versus Sergeant Slaughter. They analyzed the Sheik versus Bobo Brazil and clips from the documentary I Like to Hurt People. They watched I'm From Hollywood and excerpts from Man on the Moon, Milos Forman's film about Andy Kaufman that featured extensive wrestling sequences. The NWA and WCW received significant attention. Students analyzed the Rock and Roll Express versus the Andersons, the Midnight Express versus the Road Warriors, Ric Flair versus Rick Steamboat, and Sting versus Big Van Vader. They watched the Monday Night War documentary and analyzed Rey Mysterio versus Psychosis matches to understand the influence of Mexican lucha libre on American wrestling. This comprehensive approach meant students understood Andre not in isolation, but in context. They could see how his style of spectacle differed from the technical wrestling of a Ric Flair or the high-flying acrobatics of a Rey Mysterio. This breadth was intentional. The course traced wrestling's evolution chronologically, showing how character types changed across decades. Andre represented one era. Stone Cold Steve Austin represented another. Each reflected different cultural moments and different audience needs. But to understand why Andre warranted such extensive coverage, you need to understand what made him academically significant. Andre represented multiple intersecting themes that scholars study: disability in the body, the construction of myth, the economics of spectacle, the territorial system that preceded modern wrestling, and the transition from regional attraction to national phenomenon. Through the lens of disability studies, Andre becomes a case study in how society treats exceptional bodies. His acromegaly was simultaneously his source of fame and his greatest burden. Without the condition, he would never have become a wrestling star. With it, he was doomed to an early death. Andre knew his condition would kill him. Doctors offered treatment that might have extended his life, but treatment could have altered his appearance and potentially ended his wrestling career. Andre made a choice. He chose the spectacle over longevity. When the disease that granted him his immense size began taking its toll, Andre was in constant, near-crippling pain. His back deteriorated. His joints failed. By 1986, opposing wrestlers had to be extremely gentle with him, or they could seriously injure him. Yet he kept performing. This is where the academic analysis becomes profound. Andre was not just a wrestler. He was a text that could be read. His body told a story about sacrifice, about the price of fame, about what happens when a human being becomes a commodity. One of the most influential academic essays in wrestling studies is Never Trust a Snake by Henry Jenkins, subtitled WWE, Wrestling as Masculine Melodrama. Jenkins, a prominent media scholar, argued that wrestling serves a specific cultural function for working-class male audiences. It provides an outlet for emotional expression in a society that discourages men from showing feelings. The essay examines how wrestling creates clearly defined moral universes where good and evil are unmistakable. Unlike real life, where cheaters often prosper and justice rarely arrives, wrestling promises that villainy will eventually be punished. Working-class men, Jenkins argued, can easily relate to wrestlers because much of the audience is working class themselves. Wrestling allows the proletariat to play out a narrative in which they can overcome the upper class. Andre the Giant complicated this framework in fascinating ways. For most of his career, Andre was a beloved babyface, a hero. His size made him the ultimate underdog turned champion. Here was a man who should not exist according to the rules of normal biology, yet he dominated everyone he faced. But in 1987, Andre turned heel. He aligned with manager Bobby Heenan and challenged Hulk Hogan, betraying years of fan loyalty. This heel turn was one of the most significant in wrestling history because it weaponized everything fans loved about Andre. His size, once reassuring, became threatening. His gentle demeanor revealed itself as a mask hiding ruthless ambition. Academically, this represented what scholars call a narrative rupture. The text of Andre's body now communicated something entirely different. The same physical signs that once meant hero now meant villain. And it worked. Pro Wrestling Illustrated voted Andre the most hated wrestler of 1988, just as they had voted him the most popular wrestler in 1977 and 1982. No discussion of Andre the Giant would be complete without analyzing WrestleMania III. On March 29, 1987, the WWE claimed over 93,000 fans filled the Pontiac Silverdome to watch Andre face Hulk Hogan for the WWE Championship. Though retrospective analyses suggest the actual attendance was closer to 78,000. Millions more watched on pay-per-view. The build to WrestleMania III was masterfully crafted. Andre had been Hogan's friend and ally for years. Then, on an edition of Piper's Pit, Hogan was confronted by Bobby Heenan. Heenan announced that his new protege was Andre. Andre then challenged Hogan to a title match at WrestleMania III, ripping the t-shirt and crucifix off of Hogan in one of the most iconic moments in wrestling television history. From a storytelling perspective, it represented the passing of the torch. Andre was wrestling's biggest star of the 1970s. Hogan was wrestling's biggest star of the 1980s. Their confrontation symbolized generational transition. From a business perspective, it demonstrated the power of wrestling as spectacle. The event broke indoor attendance records. It proved that wrestling could compete with mainstream sports and entertainment. From an academic perspective, the match exemplified everything Roland Barthes described 3 decades earlier. Each sign in wrestling is endowed with an absolute clarity, Barthes wrote. One must always understand everything on the spot. When Hogan body slammed Andre, a move that had been promoted as impossible, the meaning was immediately clear. The old order had fallen. The new hero had risen. Justice was served. It did not matter that Hogan had actually slammed Andre before multiple times in earlier matches that most fans never saw. A then-heel Hogan had slammed a then-face Andre following their match at the Showdown at Shea on August 9th, 1980. When Andre was lighter, around 470 pounds, and more athletic. Andre had also previously allowed Harley Race, El Canek, and Stan Hansen to slam him in various territories. But the territorial system meant those events happened in isolation. WrestleMania III was the first time millions of viewers witnessed the slam simultaneously. By the time WrestleMania III rolled around, the WWE had gone national, giving the event an unprecedented audience. This is crucial from a media studies perspective. The same physical act can mean different things depending on context. Hogan slamming Andre in a regional territory was a local story. Hogan slamming Andre at WrestleMania III was a national myth being born in real time. Academic interest in Andre extended beyond the MYT course. Dave Meltzer, whose Wrestling Observer newsletter was required reading at MIT, wrote extensively about Andre in his tributes books. These obituary collections are considered essential wrestling history texts. Meltzer documented Andre's actual height, noting that Andre was measured at 6'9" and 3/4" in 1974, debunking the build 7'4". He chronicled Andre's international career before WWE fame. He described how opposing wrestlers had to be very gentle with Andre by 1986 because his body was so fragile. In 2014, artist Box Brown published Andre the Giant, Life and Legend, a graphic novel that became a New York Times bestseller. The book influenced subsequent documentary treatments, including the 2018 HBO documentary Andre the Giant. The HBO documentary applied academic frameworks without using academic language. It examined Andre's life through the lens of disability, exploring how his condition shaped both his opportunities and his limitations. Perhaps the most academically significant aspect of Andre the Giant is what he reveals about disability representation. Analysis from the University of Massachusetts. Boston examined Andre through the lens of disability studies, drawing on Irving Goffman's Stigma, Notes on the Management of Spoiled Identity. The analysis argued that Andre's story risks being reduced to a triumph over adversity narrative that overlooks systemic issues. Wrestling exploited individuals with unique physical attributes. Andre's condition made him valuable as a spectacle while simultaneously destroying his health. This creates an ethical tension that academics continue to debate. Did wrestling give Andre opportunities he would never have had otherwise? Or did it consume him, using his exceptional body until nothing remained? Both things can be true simultaneously. Andre chose wrestling. He refused medical treatment that might have saved his life because it might have ended his career. He found community, purpose, and fame in a world that otherwise offered few options for someone his size. But the industry also demanded that he perform through constant pain. It required him to maintain his mythological status even as his actual body deteriorated. This tension is what makes Andre academically fascinating. He is not a simple story. He is a text with multiple readings, each valid, each incomplete. When Mick Foley spoke at MIT, his lecture title captured something essential about academic wrestling studies. The real world's faker than wrestling. This sounds like a joke, but it contains a profound truth that academics have explored extensively. Wrestling admits it is performance. It does not pretend to be legitimate athletic competition. The outcomes are predetermined. The rivalries are scripted. Everyone knows the secret. Yet viewers engage anyway. They cheer the heroes. They boo the villains. They invest emotionally in stories they know are fabricated. Compare this to many supposedly real institutions. Political debates that are actually theatrical performances. Reality television that is heavily scripted and edited. News coverage that prioritizes entertainment over information. Social media personas that bear little resemblance to actual lives. Wrestling is honest about its artifice. Much of what we consider real is not. This insight has significant implications for media studies. Wrestling fans are not dupes who cannot distinguish fiction from reality. They are sophisticated consumers who consciously choose to engage with narrative. Roland Barthes understood this in 1957. What the public wants is the image of passion, he wrote, not passion itself. There is no more a problem of truth in wrestling than in the theater. Andre the Giant understood this too. His entire career was built on the gap between reality and performance. He was not actually 7'4". He was not actually undefeated for 15 years. He was not actually superhuman. But he performed superhumanity so effectively that the truth became irrelevant. The myth was more powerful than the man. The MIT course materials remain available through MIT's OpenCourseWare, allowing anyone in the world to access the syllabus, readings, and assignments. Several student term papers were published, including Professional Wrestling, the Ultimate Storytelling Device, and Wrestling with Body Discourse. Sam Ford went on to co-author the 2013 book, Spreadable Media, Creating Value and Meaning in a Networked Culture, which built on insights developed partly through wrestling studies. The course demonstrated that seemingly lowbrow subjects can yield significant academic insights when approached rigorously. Wrestling studies has since expanded, with scholars publishing peer-reviewed articles in journals of cultural studies, communication, and sociology. The MIT course did not exist in isolation. Academic wrestling studies had been developing for decades, and Andre appeared throughout this scholarship. Harvard Business School published a case study on WWE Purdue University, published a peer-reviewed academic analysis of the Montreal Screwjob, the 1997 incident involving Bret Hart and Vince McMahon that blurred the line between wrestling fiction and real corporate decisions. The University of Florida produced a doctoral dissertation in anthropology examining wrestling as symbolic reenactment of audience struggles. The researcher was later hired by WWE based on his dissertation research, demonstrating how seriously the industry took academic study. Wake Forest University produced the master's thesis that appeared on the MIT syllabus, Wrestling with Reality, Hyperreality Examined in the World Wrestling Federation. The thesis drew on the philosopher Jean Baudrillard's concept of hyperreality, the idea that simulations can become more real than reality itself. This concept applied directly to Andre. His build height of 7'4" was more real to audiences than his actual height, around 6'10". His supposed 15-year undefeated streak was more real than the various losses he suffered in regional territories. The hyper-real Andre eclipsed the real Andre. All of this scholarship demonstrated that wrestling studies was not a joke or a fad. It was a legitimate academic field, producing peer-reviewed research at universities across the country and around the world. Andre the Giant remains central to this scholarship. His career provides a case study in nearly every major theme wrestling academics explore, including the construction of mythology, the politics of the body, the economics of spectacle, and the transformation of regional entertainment into global phenomenon. Andre the Giant died on January 28, 1993, in Paris, France. He was 46 years old. The cause was congestive heart failure linked to his untreated acromegaly. His heart, enlarged by the same condition that made him famous, simply could not pump blood through his massive body anymore. He had traveled to France for his father's funeral. He wanted to be cremated, but no crematorium in France was large enough for his body. His remains had to be flown back to the United States. His ashes reportedly weighed over 17 pounds, and they were scattered at his ranch in North Carolina. Andre was the first inductee into the WWE Hall of Fame, inaugurating a tradition that continues today. The Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal is now an annual WrestleMania event, but the academic legacy matters as much as the institutional honors. Andre the Giant proved that wrestling could be studied seriously. His career demonstrated how popular culture creates and sustains mythology. His body became a text that scholars continue to read, finding new meanings in the spectacle of the eighth wonder of the world. Before there was CGI, wrestling historian David Shoemaker said in the HBO documentary, "There was only Andre the Giant." Before there were serious academic wrestling studies, there was Roland Barthes watching French wrestlers and recognizing something profound in their performance. And in the space between Barthes and MYT, Andre the Giant became something more than a wrestler. He became a subject worthy of study at one of the world's greatest universities. The MIT wrestling course was not really about wrestling. It was about how societies construct meaning through performance. It was about how bodies communicate before words are spoken. It was about how technologies change the stories we tell and how we tell them. Wrestling provided the case study. Andre provided the exemplar. When students analyzed Andre's career, they were learning to decode cultural texts. When they studied his heel turn, they were examining how narrative ruptures create meaning. When they discussed his deteriorating body, they were confronting questions about disability, exploitation, and the price of fame. I never felt much need to defend the class or explain it to anyone, wrote graduate student Kate James. The value was self-evident to those willing to look. Andre the Giant never set foot in an MIT classroom. He died 14 years before CMS 997 was offered. But in a sense, he was present throughout the course. His career exemplified everything the class sought to understand. His body was the ultimate text for students learning to read cultural meaning. Andre the Giant was a man in pain who chose to become a legend. He was a human being who became a mythology. He was a body that communicated meaning to millions who never met him. And he was worth studying at MIT. Because in the end, understanding Andre the Giant means understanding something about ourselves, about the myths we create, about the bodies we celebrate and exploit, about the stories that shape how we see the world. That is why one of the world's greatest universities studied a professional wrestler who never finished high school. And that is why, decades after his death, Andre the Giant remains a subject worthy of serious thought. And remember what Mick Foley told those MIT students. The real world is faker than wrestling. Sometimes the most honest stories are the ones that admit they are performed.